An 1890 family photo reveals dark figures holding ropes in the mirror's reflection. Figures that shouldn't exist. When Rebecca zooms in, she discovers the children's terrified eyes, the father's rope burns and scratch marks spelling, "Help us." But this wasn't a portrait at all. It was evidence of something far more sinister. An old family picture from 1890 shows something scary when you look closely. Rebecca Martinez had been buying old things at estate sales for over 20 years. But something about the big old house in Salem, Massachusetts made her feel worried. The Whitmore house had been locked up for many years after the last family member died, with no one to leave it to. As she walked through dusty rooms filled with old furniture, Rebecca found herself looking at a fancy wooden picture frame hanging in a dark hallway. The photo inside looked like other old family pictures from way back then. A serious-looking family of 5 people standing very still in their best clothes. The father was a well-dressed man with a big mustache. He stood behind his wife, who was sitting down. Their 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, were standing around them. The year 1890 was written in fading ink at the bottom of the frame. What caught Rebecca's eye wasn't the family itself, but how clear the picture was. Most photos from 1890 were blurry and hard to see, but this one showed amazing details in the clothes, furniture, and even the wallpaper behind the family. She noticed the children looked very tense for a normal family photo. Their eyes were wide with what looked like fear they were trying to hide. Rebecca bought the photograph along with several other things. She was curious about how clear it was and what story it might tell. She had no idea that this family picture would soon show a secret that had been hidden for over 130 years. Back in her Boston antique shop, Rebecca decided to clean the photograph before trying to sell it. As she carefully took it out of its frame, she noticed the picture was printed on very thick photo paper for that time period. Using a strong magnifying glass to check its condition, she began looking at the details more closely. The first thing that seemed strange was how the family members were positioned. Normal old family photos showed people sitting perfectly still because cameras took a long time to take pictures back then. But this family seemed to be caught, moving slightly. The mother's hand was blurry as if she had been shooting. The youngest child was looking to the side instead of at the camera. But when Rebecca looked at the background, she saw something really disturbing. In the fancy mirror hanging on the wall behind the family, she could see a reflection that didn't match what was in the room. Instead of showing the photographer or camera, the mirror showed what looked like several dark figures standing behind where the photographer should have been. Rebecca adjusted her magnifying glass and looked closer. The figures in the mirror were wearing dark clothes and seemed to be holding what looked like ropes or chains. Her hands started shaking as she realized this might not be a normal family photo at all. She called her friend Dr. James Harrison right away. He was a teacher who knew a lot about old photos at Harvard University. Dr. Harrison came to Rebecca's shop the next morning. He didn't believe her story at first, but he was curious about what she claimed to see. As he looked at the photograph with professional equipment, his face became very serious. "This photograph is definitely from 1890, he said, "but the situation around it is very strange. The quality means it was taken by a professional photographer with the best equipment of that time." His examination showed more disturbing details. The children's clothes, while expensive, looked like they had been put on quickly. Buttons were crooked, and the youngest girl's dress was wrinkled as if someone else had dressed her. Even more troubling were marks on the father's wrists that looked like rope burns. Dr. Harrison started researching the Whitmore family history. Records showed that Edmund Whitmore was a rich businessman who made cloth and had become wealthy during a time when many factories were being built. His wife, Catherine, came from a well-known Boston family. They had 3 children. Margaret was 14, William was 12, and little Emma was 8. The family had lived in the Salem mansion since 1885. What Dr. Harrison found next made him very scared. According to newspaper records from October 1890, The entire Whitmore family had disappeared without any trace. Their disappearance had been front-page news in Boston papers for weeks. The house had been found unlocked with no signs of a fight. It was as if the family had simply walked away from their lives. No bodies were ever found. No one asked for money to return them. No witnesses came forward. The case had remained one of Massachusetts' biggest unsolved mysteries. With this new information, Dr. Harrison called Detective Sarah Chen. She was a police officer who worked on very old unsolved crimes and had worked on several historical crime cases. When Sarah saw the photograph and heard the story, she agreed right away to start looking into the Whitmore disappearance. Sarah's first step was to have the photograph studied by crime scene experts using modern computer technology. The results were more disturbing than anyone had expected. Computer analysis showed that the figures in the mirror weren't mistakes in the photo or reflections of furniture. They were definitely human shapes, and they seemed to be holding or threatening someone just outside what the camera could see. Even more scary was finding what looked like a message hidden in the photograph. Using advanced computer programs, investigators found faint scratches in the wooden frame of the mirror. When viewed under the right light, they spelled out, "Help us." The scratches seemed to have been made on purpose, as if someone had tried to leave a secret message. The crime scene team also found that the photograph showed signs of being taken quickly, possibly when people were in danger. Unlike typical old family photos that required people to sit very still for several seconds, this picture captured tiny facial expressions and movements that suggested the family was very scared during the photo session. Sarah began to think that this wasn't a family portrait at all. Instead, it might be proof of a crime happening, possibly taken by the bad guys themselves as some kind of prize or evidence. Sarah's investigation led her to look at court records and business papers from the 1890s. What she found painted a disturbing picture of Edmund Whitmore's final months. His cloth-making business had been failing because of worker problems and money troubles. More importantly, Whitmore had borrowed a lot of money from a group of investors with questionable backgrounds who might have been connected to organized crime. In the months before the family disappeared, Whitmore had received several threatening letters demanding he pay back his debts. The letters, kept in court files about the estate, contained increasingly violent threats against his family if the money wasn't returned. One letter specifically mentioned making an example of the Whitmores that would serve as a warning to other people who owed money. Sarah also found that a professional photographer named Marcus Crane had been hired to take pictures of foreclosure proceedings at various properties around Massachusetts during this time. Crane's work was often used by debt collectors to make lists of valuable things before taking them away. More disturbing was finding out that Crane had disappeared from Boston in late 1890, around the same time as the Whitmore family. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a horrible picture. The photograph seemed to be proof of the family being held captive, possibly taken to prove to other people who owed money that the threats were real. The high quality and professional nature of the photograph supported the idea that it was taken by Marcus Crane when he was forced to do it, possibly as part of his cooperation with the criminal organization. Sarah's research into Marcus Crane revealed a sad story of a man caught between his love of art and criminal pressure. Crane had been one of Boston's most respected photographers, known for his technical skills and artistic vision. However, money problems had forced him to take increasingly questionable jobs to support his family. Court papers showed that Crane had been arrested several times in 1889 for debt-related crimes and had been known to work with criminal people who used his photography skills for scaring people and keeping records. Letters found in the Massachusetts Historical Society's files, written by Crane's wife to her sister, described her husband's growing fear and desperation as he became more involved with dangerous people. The final letter from Mrs. Crane, written just days before her husband disappeared, was particularly revealing. Marcus came home last night shaking and pale. He said they've asked him to do something terrible, something that goes against everything he believes in. He's terrified, but he says he has no choice. I fear for our family if he refuses, but I fear for his soul if he agrees. This letter suggested that Crane had been forced to photograph the Whitmore family during their captivity, possibly as proof of the creditor's power and willingness to harm debtors' families. The amazing quality of the photograph took on a scary meaning. It was meant to be kept as a warning to others, which explained why it had survived so long and why it showed such disturbing detail when examined closely. As Sarah looked deeper into the case, she uncovered evidence of what seemed to be the Whitmore family's final hours. Property records showed that the Salem mansion had been visited by several unknown people in the days leading up to the family's disappearance. Neighbors had reported seeing carriages arriving at strange hours and hearing sounds of distress from the house. A breakthrough came when Sarah found a hidden space in the mansion's basement during a search with modern equipment. Inside, she found personal belongings that had belonged to the Whitmore children: toys, clothing, and most importantly, a small diary belonging to 14-year-old Margaret Whitmore. The final entries in the diary were written in a shaky, frightened handwriting. Margaret's diary entries from October 1890 told a horrifying story. Strange men had been visiting the house, threatening her father and demanding money he didn't have. The family had been living in fear for weeks, with the children forbidden to leave the house or speak to neighbors. Margaret wrote about her father's increasing desperation and her mother's constant tears. The final entry, dated the day the photograph was taken, was barely readable. "They came back today with a cameraman. Papa is crying. They made us dress up nice and said we have to smile for a picture. Mama says to be brave. I can hear them talking about what happens next. I'm scared we won't see another sunrise. If anyone finds this, please remember us as we were, not as they want us to look." This diary entry confirmed Sarah's worst fears about the photograph. It had been taken as proof of the family's final moments before they were murdered, as an example to other people who owed money. Sarah's investigation expanded to uncover what appeared to be an organized network of debt collection that operated through scaring people, violence, and murder. The Whitmore case was not alone. Records showed that several other wealthy families who had failed to pay back loans to the same creditors had also disappeared under mysterious circumstances during the 1880s and 1890s. Working with historians and family tree experts, Sarah identified at least 6 other families who had vanished after borrowing money from the same network of investors. In each case, the disappearances followed a similar pattern: increasing threats, keeping the family away from others, and then complete disappearance without a trace. Most disturbing was finding that some of these families' former homes had also contained hidden photographs and personal belongings, suggesting a systematic approach to getting rid of witnesses. The criminal organization appeared to be led by a group of wealthy businessmen who used legal businesses as covers for loan sharking and blackmail. They employed photographers, lawyers, and other professionals to document their activities and provide an appearance of legitimacy to their operations. When people who owed money couldn't pay, the entire family was killed to send a message to others. Sarah realized that the Whitmore photograph was evidence of one of the most sophisticated and brutal criminal enterprises in 19th century New England. The organization had operated for decades, using fear and violence to control a network of people who owed them money, with the Whitmore family becoming one of their most tragic victims. The amazing quality of the photograph now made complete sense. It was meant to be kept as a permanent record of the organization's power and cruelty. Even though the crimes had happened over 130 years ago, Sarah felt she had to give the Whitmore family the dignity of having their story told and their fate acknowledged. Working with the district attorney's office, she prepared a complete report documenting the evidence of the family's murder and the criminal organization responsible. The investigation revealed that members of the criminal network had continued operating well into the 20th century, with some of their descendants becoming important members of Boston society. While no criminal charges could be filed because too much time had passed, exposing their ancestors' crimes created significant scandal and led to several families quietly making large donations to victims' rights organizations. Sarah also worked with the Massachusetts Historical Society to make sure that the Whitmore family's story was properly documented and preserved. Margaret's diary was donated to the Society's files along with the photograph and all evidence uncovered during the investigation. A memorial service was held for the Whitmore family, attended by distant relatives who had never known the true circumstances of their ancestors' disappearance. The photograph that had started as something interesting in an antique shop had become crucial evidence in solving one of Massachusetts' oldest unsolved cases. Rebecca Martinez donated the photograph to the Historical Society, saying that she could never have lived with herself knowing the family's story and keeping it for money. Dr. Harrison published a complete academic paper about the case, which became required reading in crime study and history courses focused on organized crime in America. The Whitmore case became a landmark example of how modern technology could solve historical crimes and bring closure to families who had suffered for generations without knowing their loved ones' fate. The photograph, once a source of curiosity and then horror, became a powerful symbol of the importance of preserving evidence and never giving up on seeking justice. Sarah's investigation had broader implications for historical crime research. The techniques used to analyze the Whitmore photograph were applied to other mysterious disappearances from that era, leading to the solution of several additional cold cases. The Massachusetts State Police established a dedicated cold case unit focused on historical crimes, with Sarah as its director. Rebecca Martinez used her experience with the Whitmore photograph to become an advocate for doing the right thing in the antique trade, establishing rules for handling potentially important historical artifacts. She worked with law enforcement and historians to make sure that items with possible criminal connections were properly investigated rather than simply sold as curiosities. The story of the Whitmore family photograph served as a reminder that behind every historical artifact lies a human story. And sometimes those stories demand justice even across the centuries. The terrifying detail revealed when the 1890 photograph was zoomed in. The evidence of a family's final moments had finally allowed their voices to be heard and their tragedy to be acknowledged. Margaret Whitmore's final diary entry had asked that the family be remembered as we were, not as they want us to look. Thanks to the courage of those who refused to let their story remain hidden, the Whitmore family was finally remembered not as victims frozen in a moment of terror, but as a loving family whose lives were cut short by greed and violence, and whose memory deserved to be honored and preserved for future generations.